everyone for being here. So, selamat datang ke webinar. Terima kasih semua for attending our 2024 webinar jointly organized by the School of Education at Indiana University, by the IU ASEAN Gateway Office, and of course, by Universitas Indonesia. I am Farida Pawan, the IU ASEAN Academic Director, and I'm also professor in the School of Education and the moderator for this webinar. Today, we are honored to have joining us scholars who are invested in active learning and teaching. Professor Yulianti Abbas is Associate Professor of Accounting and Chair of the Department of Accounting at Universitas Indonesia. Gamze Ozul is Associate Professor of Instructional Systems Technology and Chair of the Department of Learning Design and Adult Education at Indiana University. We also have Alejandra Aguilar Perez. She is the lead instructional designer of IU's Information Technology Services with a specialty in e-learning design in teaching and learning technologies. We also, as I said, have Ross Wilkerson, who's behind the scene helping us make sure that the technology works, as well as Sulia Nijiati, my graduate assistant. The panel speakers, will delve into research and the practicalities of active learning in the university classroom, both face-to-face and online. The webinar, for your information, will take the format of a 30-minute conversation between our panel members. And then at 30 minutes, we will open it up to questions and answers. And we have questions already developed, but you can post your questions anytime on the Q&A panel. And at that time, we will draw them into the attention of the panel members. And so thank you again, everyone, for being here, panel members. I hope we can use your first names henceforth. Welcome to the webinar, and please take it away. Professor Yuli?
Yes, thank you so much, Farida. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Very happy to be here, and I'll just give a brief overview. So we'll start our discussion from there. So basically, I want to kind of discuss a little bit about our university, which is UIS, the oldest, largest university in Indonesia. We have a really diverse students and faculty members from different backgrounds and experience. And traditionally, at UI and very common in other Indonesian university, we relied on some teacher-centered method that where students passively receive information. But lately, with the Indonesia rapid development and also we kind of serve as a role model in Indonesia, we try to adopt this active learning, which is seen as a way to bridge the gap between the theory and the practical application. So our students will be kind of more adaptive, more critical, and hopefully more resourceful when they go out and face this competitive global environment. So basically, we want to have students to engage in various real world scenarios while also learning the theory and the concept in the classroom. So at UI, we have various resources. We have classroom that accommodate active learnings. The university also try to develop workshops and various trainings for the faculty members to understand the active learnings. But since, like mentioned very early, we have different background, different experience. So the way we teach is very much affected by our experience and what we think about how we will share our knowledge. So I think that's where we have these various problems that I think we will be able to discuss today. So we already experienced like case study, simulation, discussion. I think that's like a really common method used in teachings, but I believe there are plenty of other methods. And since we are dealing with different students and different level of difficulty of the courses, and of course, there might be some adjustment needed to make sure that this active learning that we intend from the beginning will be able to be conducted successfully. So I think that's just the background of UE. So we have started to adopt these active learnings, but of course, with the with the growing needs of students, and it's also something that's maybe not yet in the curriculum, not yet in the books, and they probably read it somewhere, or they just exposed to information from various sources. And of course, these active learnings will also kind of help us as the faculty members to also kind of accommodate the knowledge that the students probably experience or they get from the media or from other sources. So I think that's probably just kind of a brief overview, and I have maybe some other question that will come later after the talk. Thank you, Farida.
Good morning, everyone, here in Bloomington and in Indonesia. So nice to meet you in this webinar. And thank you, Yuli, for giving us a little bit background of what is happening in the university and what are the things you are trying out and what are the things you might be looking into. So Alejandra and I try to, in the past 2 weeks, look into the research and then look at the publications and best practices from Alejandra's experience working with faculty members. What are the strategies we can help with the active learning in the classroom? And some of the things you mentioned, we will already address it in the slides. And then we are looking for a very good discussion learning from your practices and every participant's practices, and then sharing ideas and empowering women for future successful faculty and students. So if you can share our slides, Alejandra, we could start the presentation. So today we are going to talk about and brainstorm what can we do in higher education classrooms for active learning strategies. So this session is a webinar, but since we are talking about active learning, we would like you to be a bit active rather than passively listening to me. So we have a question to you, and I would like you to type answers in the Q&A. So far, as Yuli said, you might have tried some methods or strategies in your classes for keeping your students engaged. What are some things you tried in your classes to keep students active? Or what was the most engaging learning activity you experienced as a student when you were going to college or as an instructor? Would you give us some ideas so we know more about you and we can build our presentation on it? So would you take a minute to type in Q&A and answer to one of these questions, please? Let's hear from you. We have so far wonderful responses are coming from many of you. For example, Rifili Devi said using interactive tools such as Kahoot or Mentimeter. And then Rachel says discussion questions for students. Izathur says interactive games work as well for creating active learning environments. Dana says activities for applied learning and reflection, breaking it out into groups is a wonderful way. Ur says real life projects with real clients, maybe problem-based learning activities. There's an issue, Ross, with a chat box, chat disabled, but for one person, but we can chat. Nanda says problem-solving exercise. So very good. I'm so glad you have a wide range of ideas for starting active learning in your classrooms and then trying these out. So it gives us an idea of what we can do. In terms of, we were having a tiny bit technical problem, but we are opening the chat, I think.
Yes, if you would like the chat to be open, we can open this up for everyone. So thus far, we only have
so it's open. Type in the chat too.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you. So it's another thing. Whenever we do a technology activity, we always need to have a plan A. As you all know, then there's a plan B. So thank you for your patience and working through with us. So I think it gives us a good idea of where to start and what are the things you are experiencing for our first question. And thank you for those who provided input and let us know what's going on in their own classrooms. So the next thing we want to talk about to you is like, to make an active learning, you need to figure out an instructional strategy. So I just want to go back for a second. What is an instructional strategy? So designing a course, you need to come up with instructional materials, you have course objectives, and you have assessment. But how are you going to deliver the material is a strategy. So these strategies include materials and procedures that enable students to achieve course learning outcomes. So these are the helpful vehicles for students to get from what you want them to learn and where they're able to successfully master those skills. These strategies help them to go from point A to point B. So what could be these strategies? So in the research, it is generally considered as, it could be contextualizing instruction. You give them a context, you make it relevant, you hook it with their prior experiences, you present the content in a way that is with using different strategies. You need to activate learning processing, strategies will help with that. And then you assess outcomes. And then these, we are doing it all to achieve a specific instructional goal. Why are we talking about instructional strategies? Because to achieve active learning in the classroom, you need to come up with instructional strategies as a professor, which are helpful for students being active. Next, please. So then what is active learning? So there are many definitions in the field, but these are generally the instructional strategies that are designed to engage students specifically with the learning process. Direct instruction, like lecturing, could be an instructional strategy, but it's not a very active strategy. Or giving students a reading to read could be a strategy, but is not very active. So there are some learning strategies that are more passive, that students are receiving information and they are building ideas. They may be learning things through direct presentation of material, and there are some that are more active learning. So in active learning strategies, it dives more into students' experiences. They do things, they observe things, they experience things by themselves. And then in these active learning strategies, student has autonomy. So they would like to reflect, and then on their own learning process, they may reflect on the classroom environment, they may reflect critically on the content, and then they are participating actively in the whole learning process. So if we go more, this is a little bit more academic definition, I think, than we need. But so active learning and active instructional strategies engages students in the learning process by encouraging them to actively participate, collaborate, and apply their knowledge rather than passively absorbing information. So as you all experience, it's easier to say than do it, right? So what we need to do is like, what are the strategies as instructors we can try out and promote that students actively participate they collaborate and apply their knowledge instead of just listening. So the common element when we do instructional strategies that promote active learning is how can we get students to do things and think about the things that they are doing. So that's where we have the challenge as instructors. The research says that student active learning and teaching strategies that are student-centered are more helpful to student learning for their retention, but it is, even there's a big call for making instruction more student-centered, there's a predominantly traditional teacher-centered instruction is remaining in higher education. And we have this citation from 2020, so it is pretty recent, and there's always a call for getting it more student-centered. Next. Again, it is time to actively participate. So I want to hear from you. When we think about this idea of making ways and designing our courses to make it more student-centered, what challenges or barriers you may be facing or you faced already for implementing active learning strategies in your classroom? So you can write in the chat. Now it's open, or in Q&A. Very good. Very good. So Rahmani said, not all students are motivated to learn. As professors, we find the content interesting, but not everybody thinks it's as interesting to learn about. And sometimes students are not willing to participate. Very true. They don't want to do as Izatur says. And then Nashun mentioned multiple distractions. Yes, there's like they have lives, they have multiple courses, and there's technology in the classroom. Very good, Dana. Sometimes I struggle with come up with interesting active learning strategies. That's why we are here to all brainstorm and empower all of us. Yes, that is a thing. As Vayan Satria said, sometimes students don't want to show they don't know so much or they know a little in front of their peers. So they're worried about making mistakes. And then for materials are challenging, such as statistics, to make it students, maybe to make them actively involved. Rachel says time constraints. Yes, students limited time for group work, especially in online learning, or mentions as a challenge. And then as an instructor, we have so many things we are doing, many classes we are teaching. Do we have time to develop these instructional strategies and implement them and reflect on them as instructor? And then fear of failure, Nasheen mentioned, very good things that are very interesting. Yeah. So you are not alone. I mean, when we look at the literature cites some of the barriers that we already talk about.
Thank you everyone so much for sharing your experiences. I have to say, in webinars, seeing what everyone writes, just contributing to the discussion is my favorite part. So thank you so much. And like Gamze pointed out, a lot of these things that you mentioned are actually already cited in the research literature as notable barriers to implementing active learning strategies. And so definitely lacking enough time within your class curriculum to cover certain content can be a big issue, because in active learning strategies, the goal is generally for students to produce something. So it would make sense that there is less time in those instances for direct instruction or less time for content to be presented, which is definitely a notable barrier.
Do we all see the PowerPoint or it disappeared? Just to double check.
I can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure why it might not be showing up for you. But similarly, someone mentioned time constraints, and because all active learning strategies at some point do require varying levels of preparation on behalf of the instructor, it is very important to be intentional in what strategies you're choosing that fit the need of your students and can actually be implemented within, a lesson or a series of lessons. We know that, for example, class sizes can also be a big issue. And active learning strategies have actually been shown to have considerable success in collaborative settings. But of course, we know from experience that it's a lot easier said than done in a classroom with 100+ students. And then just very quickly to move through this slide, we mentioned something about, possible resistance from instructors themselves, because maybe that's more traditional lecture style presentations or styles that they're used to or they prefer. And so students may also prefer that style as well if that's all they've been exposed to. So definitely a notable barrier. And just lastly, it can be difficult to get started with active learning if you feel like you don't have all of the necessary equipment in the classrooms or online. So just thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences with us. And I'm going to move on to the next slide. So one thing, we'll briefly touch upon 5 strategies that you can start implementing in your own classes right away. But I do want to start off by just saying that there are perhaps other considerations you can take into account when designing your classes that will, along with learning strategies, provide a more meaningful class experience for your students and a more meaningful learning experience. So one thing to consider is that it is definitely beneficial to, where possible, connect prior knowledge with new learning. And this is because this facilitates the deeper learning possibilities for students, and it can help students, just relate these new concepts to what they already know, and therefore strengthening their memory. And this can also be helpful in terms of recalling information later on. So here, we're interested in deeper learning, and that can definitely be something that can be integrated into your classes. Because we are, dealing with adult learners here, they come already with all of these rich experiences, lots of things they've learned, throughout their life. And that's why it's so key to also provide a rationale as to why we are including, certain activities. So really explaining the how and why can be key. And on my screen, you're seeing a few images that have been included in classes that I've designed before. For example, this Google Slides image, this is in Spanish, but essentially the instructor wanted a way for students to connect their ideas of what culture is, and they wanted to create a visual representation of that. And so they used Google Slides, which brings me to my next 2 points, that it's very important to bring relevance where possible to the student experience. So of course that can be, relevance to their lives, but that might not necessarily be feasible in all subjects. So something to consider is that you may just want to ensure that your course is relevant to other courses in the degree program, or relevant to, those pre or even post-requisite courses. And just lastly, because technology, wow, we could speak about that for hours if we wanted to. And I would love it. I love technology in the classroom. But one thing to consider is that, there are just so many tools out there, and it can be so daunting as an instructor to know what to use. So with that in mind, it's important to be intentional with your technology use. And as you may already have tools that you usually use, such as Google Drive or Google Slides, that can help, with the use of technology. So you don't necessarily have to use the most innovative tools for a really meaningful learning experience. And we won't unfortunately have time to go in depth on all of these, but we did just want to present an overall, nice image here of some sample learning activities. And here, this graphic goes from simple in terms of complex, both in terms of preparation level and the complexity required for the students as well. And Gamze, if you have anything to add here, please feel free. And yeah, Gamze, I'd love to hear a little bit more from Gamze, because I know that one perhaps issue that instructors might face is this idea of, well, I have to cover so much material. How can I actually use these within my lessons?
And there was a comment on the chat from one professor saying it's okay to do lectures sometimes and not everything has to be active learning. And if we think as professors we have to do everything active learning, it's a lot of pressure on us. But if you're even doing a lecture, think about how you can integrate little pieces of active learning between the lecture parts, because now we know the new generation students have limited attention, and as instructor it's so hard to gain their attention when they are always interacting with different videos on internet, different media. So what we are suggesting here with Alejandro is like, you may think about breaking your lecture into small chunks, and in between you can add or try out an active learning strategy to see how it works. And this way it breaks their attention, and then once you lecture again, their attention is fresh to pay, and then that may be helpful to try out to start. So lecture is still okay, but think about how you can incorporate little pieces. And not everything needs to be active learning, because some things are better direct instruction because you have limited time. And direct instruction, because we don't have time, this is our first time. In the future, if we work together more, what type of knowledge are you trying to teach students? If it's the definition, maybe lecture is the best. But if we are trying to have them synthesize a deep, complex topic, then you may need to do a hands-on project. So depending on how you want to, what you want to achieve, what is your objective? Go ahead, Alejandra. That's my.
Thank you so much, Gamze. And you bring up such excellent points. And ultimately, this sort of also feeds into my experience working with faculty members, that ultimately all of you are the subject matter experts. You know exactly what your students need to learn to be successful. And incorporating these strategies, it also takes, some time and some level of experimentation, and that's okay. And again, just briefly, we want to showcase 5 specific strategies. These are just sample strategies, and unfortunately, we won't be able to go very much in depth, but you will see that some of these slides present both in-person and online options here for you. And so again, it's just a matter of thinking about your needs and the needs of your students. Strategy 1, and something that I always suggest to my faculty members when that makes sense, provide ungraded classroom practice opportunities. And that can be something as simple as during your lecture, asking open-ended questions and having students raise their hand. Or if you wanted to incorporate technology, did you know that in Microsoft PowerPoint, you can actually have forms embedded into your slides to make them a little bit more interactive? Students can then use their phone, to scan the QR code, as you're seeing on this example, and can actually interact with your slides in real time, giving you feedback and the ability to, maybe make a few changes on the spot or bring up a concept that was particularly difficult. Similarly, you can do this online by incorporating brief ungraded quizzes in your learning management system, or even asking students for an exit ticket or a brief reflection before they move on to the next topic. And that can be done both in online spaces and in in-person classrooms through a minute paper. And these are just some tools that might be useful as well. But again, I would always recommend seeing what is already available to you at your university. strategy 2, and it regards to is also in regards to the design of your courses. And so we suggest applying universal design for learning principles. Universal design for learning is a framework that encourages creating a flexible learning environment to suit the needs, the diverse needs of all your learners. So here what we're really trying to do is promote learner agency. And so we have also included a link to this in case you would like to explore a little bit more, but just some brief examples are, providing both a video and maybe a reading for your students to have access to. Incorporating guest lecturers or podcasts from other experts in your field, and presenting content in an accessible manner, such as providing captions on videos that will help students who are maybe having hearing issues, but also for your busy student that's in a cafe and forgot their headphones. And
And then Dr. Pawan is saying we are limited on time, but I would like to mention to this one, you can think about collaborative learning environments in your classrooms. This could be done with pair and share models or jigsaw models. And in this one, we are not diving so deep into, but one of the chat participants mentioned students are not willing to participate, they are reluctant. So in these models, you build a team of students, and then you ask them to become an expert on a topic. So whatever is the course topic. So then they have the job of learning the topic, and they have the responsibility of teaching it to their peers. So in this way, they take the ownership of their learning and keep their teammates accountable of learning. So in this type of methods, you do individual assessment after they do the project or how you develop. And then you look for the group assessment. Everybody in the groups needs to perform certain level for the team to be successful. So it gives the group cohesiveness of taking ownership of their learning. So in in-person classes, you can use issues and topics, or in the online classes, you can use it as well. There's an issue of you can do it with the known peers, unknown peers, anonymous peers. So there's ways to do it, but it's a very details for us to go into, but we are very happy to answer questions more. The next one is, I think you are already using it, project-based learning or problem-based learning. Project-based learning will work great in online classes. You can have your students connect with real data. So there was one comment in the participant statistics. You may be able to find data sets that are real data sets, and that may be on topics that may matter to students. Like in US, I'm thinking students may be interested in kid hunger levels in their city. So that's the relevant statistics, and they can download it from their local area, or it could be at the time health data, and then you are having them apply the statistics, whatever you want to do in that project. So it gives them a relevant content and context. Either you assign it to that or give them the real data, so they are really solving a real world problem. In problem-based learning, it's a little bit more time consuming, so it may be easier to do it in person classes. So you need to find a ill-structured problem that doesn't have a really one correct answer. And as I mentioned, so it may be better for higher order instructional issues that you want the student to have deeper knowledge versus just the definition. And then how you come up with a problem. Student works in small groups. Again, they have to participate. Everybody has a role that they assign and they negotiate amongst each other. So everybody is responsible. And then you do multiple ways of assessment. You can do the assessment, peer assessment, self-assessment, group work assessment, and individual assessment. So, and then those could bring more active learning strategies in the classroom. Next.
also, I have to say, thinking back on my college days, some of my absolute favorite activities and those that I learned the most were problem-based sort of projects. Now that I think about it, definitely something to be said about those. And just for strategy 5, there comes a lot of there is a lot of power with designing authentic assessments, because again, we're trying to bring in that relevance to students' life, or maybe to even their future workplace. So these are definitely, this is definitely a strategy that can be applied both in person and online, but it does require a lot more preparation work from the instructor. So something to keep in mind, that this would be something perhaps great for an end of the semester project, rather than, constantly embedded throughout the class, just because, again, time constraints. So it is important to determine what is an authentic task within that field, or, for your students in the future. So this is also a really great opportunity to chat with other people in the community and with your peers as well.
I'm sorry to chime in at this point, hopefully gently, but I think we're at a point right now that a lot of people are looking forward to, which is the Q&A.
That is great, because we're in our last slide. We just want to take 1 second to point out that we have the references that include the open source articles that either I published with another author, or we found resources from IU that you can create a guest account and get access, or open resources to share with you.
I think you're right. I went through the resources myself, and they are incredible. The active learning ideas are long, from the Center for Educational Innovation, as well as our own Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, which we all rely upon. So at this point in time, thank you, Gamza, and thank you, Alejandra. At this point in time, there are a lot of questions, and I've opened up the chat and I've opened up the Q&A. The Q&A is always open, but at this point in time, Yuli, I think, has several burning questions that's already at the top of her mind. But the audience members, please join Yuli as well in posting your questions in all the channels that you have. Yuli, please proceed.
Okay. Yeah, Gamze and Alejandra, there was like tons of interesting things that you're talking about. So I think we need like more than an hour, of course, to discuss all of that. Just kind of because you talk about like the simple to the really complex method to apply this active learning. So maybe you can share if there any evidence, like research, or maybe your experience on whether some strategies that you just mentioned work better compared to others.
I will jump in. So
Before you do, Gamza,
okay.
Alejandra, can you stop share?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
That is a great question. So in the field I'm studying, instructional systems technology, we design these either small studies or large scale studies to inform the practices of instructors just like you and your colleagues. So for example, there's one study that I shared with you is about problem-based learning. So in this case, the problem was the students were leaving the radiography, X-ray expertise without getting enough confidence in being able to get a patient, lay them down, and take the X-ray. So in that one, in the students' clinical practice, when they are doing their hours, the instructor decided to use a problem-based learning module. So in this one, first she recorded a video of a patient in pain coming to the center to be X-rayed. And then she shows articles from real newspapers saying that if you expose patients to so many X-rays, that they get sick, or there's some lawsuits that you cannot do it multiple times, to show that the students the importance of how you need to do it one time and you have to do it correct one time. Then she goes through to a problem-based learning environment by presenting students a real case with an actual X-ray and a problem, like this patient is arriving here, and then these are the X-ray taken by a technician. What is wrong with this image? So you need to evaluate. And then what the research found out that the students' image critique skills significantly improved from their regular case-based instruction to problem-based instruction, and now their confidence increased. In another study, it is done in the business communications I shared with you as well. The objective was students in the global workforce, they need to be the leaders in their field who can manage online teams. So to be able to do this class, we designed an authentic learning environment where the students needed to be in teams and managing each other to solve problems. So in that one, we find out that the students learn the content better, and then not only content, but they developed the skills that they were learning about because they had to practice it on their teammates. So they're time consuming, they generally work, but then as instructional designer, Alejandro would agree with me, is it worthwhile? So what is the skill? So in these two examples I gave you, the skill is so important that it is worthwhile for an instructor to design a active learning environment with this type of a thing. But if it was like being able to define what a cell is, maybe not an active, it's the definition, right? So that's what I'm saying. Alejandra?
Thank you so much. And that's definitely a conversation that I'm always having with instructors, just trying to arrive at, their ideas in terms of what is it that their students truly need, and what are the ways that we can achieve that with, the fact that we also have to cover a lot of other material and a plethora of other things. So very right, Nazim.
Yeah, great. So I think from the question in the chat box earlier, like there are people comments just like how to make students more active. Right? So and people react to incentives. So, yeah. So as instructor, how do you think we should like create some kind of like grading metrics to assess these active learning? Because I think if it's just left without any grading or any score, then maybe it will, some people will not be motivated to participate. So can you maybe just explore what metrics we can use? Because I think different activity might need a different way to assess. And we hope, of course, like the way we will grade the students will kind of, kind of make them more motivated to participate in active learning.
So a few examples I can think about. That's a great question, Yuli, and we struggle with the same issues in here too. So it's a universal problem, not only a Indonesia or a country problem. So one thing could be like if it is a poll or a active participation, let's say a clicker or millimeter in the classroom, you can see if they are really participating. So you can count those as participation points versus just showing up in the classroom versus actively participating. In the projects, if you find real clients, you can ask the client to rate each group member and give them a score from 1 to 5. I do it in my own classes, or give an overall score to the team. So in this one, you're holding the whole team accountable, and the real person, the project manager or the client, is giving back a grade that will be attached to student scores. And in other ones, I was also thinking like how you can make the groups accountable for each other's learning. So in some of the group projects, you can have each student get a grade, but you can give them a task where all group gets one score. So they have to keep each other accountable of participating and doing. The one last thing I'm thinking, is very important to get to know our students, and I'm sure your instructors are doing good, but you can ask a few extra questions of like, what are their interests? What are the things that they care about? So you may bring examples that these topics in the questions or cases that may make them more willing to participate.
And I've also found that the instructors I work with, they also, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but they, besides, asking students to add a little bit more relevance by explaining, things they're interested in, one other thing that they do is just explain the active learning strategies themselves, and sort of explain the rationale behind why these are being implemented in the first place, even before the assessment, before they're actually incorporated, just to let students know, hey, we're trying something new. and we're going to see how it goes. And they found a lot of success with that. Again, just making students aware of, how they are teaching the course, and just providing a brief rationale or context as to why they're making decisions. I think that gives a lot of, again, agency to students, knowing why instructors are doing what they're doing in the class and not just assuming.
And then in the chat, a few of us said fear of being right or wrong. And I think it's also like, we need to think about these active strategies as a whole program, not like one course. Because I think we need to think and change the mindset of students coming into the program in your program. So how can you think this classroom is a safe environment? And your participation matters, not if you are correct or not wrong. You have to be able to say what you think, communicate, and it's important, I think, in business school, especially being able to communicate and not be fearful of saying right and wrong, and it may take it even longer in their workplace for success. So how can you have them practice these? And then, as Alejandra say, setting these expectations, maybe in the orientation, when you have the students say that this is what we value in this business program. We want you to be actively present here because we want you to be actively present in the workforce. And that's why we are doing everything. So maybe it will help a little bit.
Yeah, great. So I think that's probably something that we all have experienced, right? And yeah, I hope the audience can also kind of share their experience and maybe ask questions, especially if you've encountered any problem when you're trying to apply this active learning. So maybe something that's related to all of us, which is like creating this active learning materials, these strategies, this method might not be something that's simple, right? And then just kind of like decide like which topic we will use the active learning and how long. So I think that's something that's also challenging. And maybe, we're also used to be the one that talk the most in the classroom, probably as professor, right? And then but we know that we need to transform and then kind of use active learning to prepare our students. So as a professor, what have you found like the greatest challenges when we said we want to transfer to active learning? Because like from my experience, sometimes I think, oh, I'm going to adopt this, but then I don't have time and definitely okay, I'm just do lecture. So,
Yeah.
but what are the challenges that you've known or you've experienced?
So this is like, there are two things that you mentioned there, and so correct. One is like, it is scary for instructors to switch what they are comfortable and they have been doing many years to something brand new. So I would say start small. You don't have to change all your curriculum, but start trying and experimenting. And then again, like the fear of failure, we have that as instructors. We want our courses to be good, but sometimes we try things and it doesn't work out. But if we don't try it, we never change our practices. So innovation, change is always fearful, but we need to take that leap. So I was thinking like, instead of changing your maybe whole course, try one session or two sessions to see how it works. And then you can keep reflection notes. And if you like in your departments, you can create a learning community. Because if everybody wants to try active learning, maybe you can share resources, activities, and experiences, what worked, what didn't work. So the next teacher may go in more empowered to do this and more confident to do this. So that may be a share of resources and share of experiences to support each other, maybe a way to go. Alejandra, anything?
Well, I definitely agree with sharing. I've found that sharing is very powerful among the instructors I work with. And a lot of times they're, because I have access to so many courses, I can bring in examples that have worked from other courses, even within the department or within that particular school. And that's been really helpful. Also agree with starting small, just, trying one thing. Like if all you have time for is implementing one of these strategies in the semester, that's great. Again, it's a process, and it's also a process for students to get them used to it as well. So you don't have to redesign your whole curriculum. That is definitely something that we're we're keeping in mind. And time constraints, we understand, are also a huge issue. So start small. Small habits and small changes can have very big effects.
So baby steps. Yes. So how do you just kind of like a just follow up of like, so basically when you said, oh, okay, I tried this and it failed, and I tried it, oh, it seems to be successful. So how do you usually measure like the effectiveness of the new teaching method that you try to adopt in the classroom? I mean, like do you use some kind of assessment, or just like looking at like the participation? So what's the ways to kind of make you feel like, oh, I did this the right way?
So very good question, Yuli. So in the two examples I gave you about the articles, so the problem was the content wasn't mastered by the students. So the instructor needed to do something that would deepen students' learning experience and make it a more permanent learning experience that they would remember, they would immerse in, and they would learn. But there may be issues that it's the foundational class and the students are very passively listening, and that's the engagement problem. They may be on their devices, they are distracted, as one of our chat participants wrote. So then you are thinking about like, they may be learning the content, they are getting all the good grades in the knowledge level class introductory course, but they are so bored, and then as an instructor you are feeling like you are not able to gain their attention. So in that case, maybe you stop your lecture after a few minutes, like as we explained, and do a poll activity or an interest activity, and then see if they are more engaged, and then you can see if it makes a difference in the engagement, because that's an engagement problem you are trying to solve. Another problem you may be trying to solve, like the class is so big, students are not able to get feedback from you. As an instructor, you don't have time. And feedback is a very powerful source that helps students to learn and reinforce the material. So as an instructor, you are trying to, your goal is like, how can I give more feedback to students? Then you may use a different tool that you pose a question and they click on the answer and see if there's any misconception. So there you are trying to solve the understanding the misconceptions and giving feedback. So there's like, depending on what you are trying to solve with your active learning strategy, that may change how you evaluate its effectiveness or not. And there's some courses in, I don't know, I'm sure in Indonesia too, in US, these courses that in colleges students take, like Algebra 1, the math, the biology, that are barrier courses. Sometimes if they don't pass it, they don't become an engineer. But if they pass these courses, they are more likely to finish the degree. So in these courses, how can you design the material so the students can understand it step by step? So in that one, you are looking for active learning strategies or other strategies, how you can make the material comprehensible for students. In that one, you can use the principles like we discussed, UDL, or using different representations, giving more practice to students than less practice, giving more feedback, frequent feedback. And we didn't get into the details, but you can AI-based support that students can ask questions to AI to learn more in writing. So depending on what problem you are trying to solve, I would evaluate it in that sense.
Yes, and then I think every time we get to the classroom, we'll be dealing with students with kind of diverse needs.
Yes.
And maybe some students, they might come from a background in their high school and their previous education that they are so used to this traditional teaching, in their previous education, so they are not used to, kind of react or give opinion in the classroom. And maybe you'll meet students from maybe like international schools that maybe have been encouraged to participate in the classroom. So you'll find these dynamics, right? The different composition with every class that you experience. So how do you kind of design this active learning when you see, oh, this is the dynamics in the classroom, and this is what the students are, kind of used to, and this is something that they are not used to. So how would that work?
Yeah, in every, I think, activity, you can do an orientation. You can say, students, we are going to try something new today. Or in this program, in this university degree, our program values student-centered learning. Or, I mean, there's not like student-centered learning, but it's more active learning for students. So then you keep doing it, but every time you do something new, you need to let them know. So they are not surprised and their expectations are aligned. And then they are open to try something. And you need to let them know about the rules. I mean, some learning things have rules and constraints, like what can they do, what cannot they do, and then what are the new expectations from students is very important.
That's also, you know, where the UDL principles come into play as well. So I think one of the most meaningful things that I've discovered throughout my job is just how powerful the power of choice can be. So giving students choices when it comes to how they are, you know, interacting with you. For example, maybe you have an online hybrid class and you want to schedule a Zoom meeting with them. Is there an option to do more of an email style conversation? You know, maybe some students would be more comfortable with that. Other students would prefer to have the Zoom meeting, right? Or also when it comes to how they're engaging with their materials. Readings are very standard. Are there some very well-made videos, maybe on YouTube, that can also cover that same information in a slightly different way? Or are they, you know, podcasts with different experts that can highlight some new perspectives? And by applying these principles, I think that can also have a big impact on helping all of your students. So I would definitely recommend checking those out.
And instructional design, every context is unique, and then every educational problem is unique too, in a way. So you know how is your students' incoming expectations, how their high school was, what they were used to, how they are coming to college. So it is maybe up to setting up expectations. The other thing we talked with Alejandro yesterday, maybe modeling sessions. If a professor is successful doing something, you can maybe do a 2 hour or like 1 hour, 15-minute in-service gathering, and then you model how you did that. So the faculty may see how it feels to be in the shoes of student in a content, or you can just describe like what you did, how you did it, and then exchange ideas. So they see what is it to be responsible of the own learning and being active in a classroom too. So more, as you said, you are doing some trainings and gatherings, so that there may be a way of modeling good practices with others.
Yeah, and just kind of like wondering, because you know, like still about students that might come from different background, and maybe they also have a certain like characteristics, like the way they view like interaction in the classroom. So when you look at students, and then you see somebody who's like never participated, and can we say, should we kind of push them to participate? Or we just maybe they have just a different way of learning. So what do you think about that?
So that's a very interesting question, and I don't think we have one answer that would fit everything. But what we know is to be able to learn a material, you need to be engaged. That's the basic minimum. So some people, like we have some students who like to draw things when they are listening. So actively participating. But if they're asked to do something and actively participate, if they don't, then you may need to say something in terms of these group work activities. But if it's a classroom poll, maybe they don't want to participate physically, but they are more willing to do it in an
I see.
online platform, right? So they are less nervous.
The method.
Yeah. So you can try ways that they are a bit more anonymous, maybe to start with these students, and then see what strategies. And if it's a collaborative strategy, they have to participate. Otherwise, it's not part of the grading and stuff. But it's also change of culture, how they learn what they learn, those type of things.
I've also noticed that if students are given the, the choice to participate in something online, they don't, necessarily receive a grade, or perhaps they may, depending on the instructor's preference. But if they're just told, this is a space where you can interact with your peers, pose questions, I've noticed that they tend to do that. And, these spaces are usually not as closely monitored by the instructor, although the instructor can always go in. But at that point, they're forming these meaningful connections with their peers. And so that's always something I'm thinking about as I design online courses. How can I create a community for students within these online classes?
Getting to the end of the hour, actually, and I know there's a lot more to say, and I'm seeing questions. I'm hoping questions can come after all the slides the panel members have said are available, will be sent to everyone, and this recording as well, so you'll have a chance to revisit. And so there's a lot more discussions that can go on forever. A lot, I know from working with our panel members, they have a huge repository of activities and suggestions. And so I think, they've given you their connection, contact information. I think that's where more conversations can take place. And several of us as well will be at Universitas Indonesia in the future. So at this point in time, I thank Yuli for inviting us to engage in this webinar with Universitas Indonesia. And then we thank the panel members, of course, Professor Gamza Ozul and Alejandra. And so this is just the beginning of our engagement. Thank you, everyone, for being here. You've pushed our thinking, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
It was lovely to meet all of you and hear of your experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Bye.